Hey everyone, you ever have that feeling that your data has a really interesting story to tell, but you just don't know how to get it to talk? Well, today we're going to look at a super powerful tool that does just that. It's called analysis of variance, or as you'll probably call it, ANOVA. So if you're ready to get past just comparing two simple groups and start asking bigger, more interesting questions, you are definitely in the right place. So here's what we're going to do. First, we'll talk about why the good old t-test, as great as it is, sometimes just isn't enough. Then we'll get into the big idea behind ANOVA, what actually makes it tick. After that, we'll put it to work with a real-world case study about parenthood. And then, this is the fun part, we're going to dig a little deeper and see what's hiding under the surface. And finally, we'll wrap it all up with what this whole thing really teaches us. Okay, let's jump right in. You know, a lot of the time, we start our journey with data by comparing two things. But let's be honest, the world is way more complicated than that. And that brings us to the exact problem that ANOVA was built to solve. I mean, think about it, right? Comparing men and women, we've got tools for that. But what if you want to compare experiences across, say, 4 different types of parenthood? All of a sudden, the simple tools we're used to, well, they just don't cut it anymore. And this, right here, lays it all out perfectly. A t-test, it's kind of like a seesaw, right? You put one group on each side, and you see which way it tips. But what happens when you have 3 groups, or 4, or more? You can't just keep adding seats to the seesaw. That's where ANOVA comes in. It's like a whole different machine designed to handle all that extra complexity. So, the big question is, how does this thing actually work? What's the magic? Well, it's actually built on this really cool, really elegant idea. So let's pull back the curtain and look at the logic behind it all. Okay, so here's the textbook definition. At its heart, ANOVA is just a way to compare a bunch of groups. We have our groups, that's our independent variable, and then we have the thing we're measuring, which is our dependent variable. Now, ANOVA starts from a place of, well, skepticism. It assumes there's absolutely no difference between any of the groups. We call this the null hypothesis. And the whole point of the test is to see if our data is strong enough to shout, nope, that's wrong. And here it is. This is the secret sauce. ANOVA basically looks at 2 kinds of messiness, or variation in your data. First, it measures how different the groups are from each other. You can think of this as the between-group variation. Then it looks at how much people just naturally vary inside their own group. That's the within-group variation. The whole test just boils down to one simple question. Are the differences between the groups bigger than the random noise inside the groups? Now, before I show you the formula for this, I gotta share this great quote from our source material. The math can look a little scary, but as the text says, if you ever find yourself having to do this by hand, you've probably got bigger things to worry about, like the world ending. We have computers for this, so let's just focus on the idea, not the arithmetic. And really, this is all it is. The result of an ANOVA is called an F statistic, and it's just a simple fraction. On top, you have the variation between the groups. On the bottom, you have the variation within the groups. So if the groups are really, really different from each other, that top number is going to be big, our F statistic is going to be big, and that's when we start thinking, something interesting is definitely going on here. Okay, that's enough theory. Let's see how this thing actually performs in the real world. We're going to grab some data from the General Social Survey and see if we can figure out the relationship between someone's parented status and their feelings of marginalization. All right, let's fire up the software and get our hands dirty. First things first, we got to find the right button to push. We're going to go to Analyze, then Compare Means, and then we're going to pick One-Way ANOVA. And why one way? Well, because we only have one independent variable that defines our groups. In this case, parenthood. Simple as that. Okay, next step is super simple. We just got to tell the computer what to look at. Our factor, that's just a fancy word for our grouping variable, is going to be parenthood. And the thing we're measuring, the dependent variable, is the score for marginalization. We pop those in the right boxes, and we are ready to rock. And boom, just like that, we get our results. The number you want to look for right away is the p-value, or the significance. The easiest way to think about this is, it's the probability that you'd see these results just by pure random chance. Our p-value here is 0.001. That is tiny. It means there's only a 1 in 1,000 chance that this is a total fluke. So we can be pretty darn confident there's a real relationship here. But, and this is so important, ANOVA only tells us that a difference exists somewhere. It doesn't tell us what or where it is. To figure that out, we have to actually look at the average scores for each group. And when we do, the differences are actually pretty small. Everybody's kind of clustered together.
So the math says there's a difference, but is it a big deal? Is it actually meaningful? Well, that's our job to figure out.
And this is where the real fun of being a researcher starts. Getting a significant result isn't the end of the story, it's the beginning. It's a clue that tells you to start digging. It makes you ask, okay, but is there more going on here? Maybe we just need to look at this from a different angle.
So let's put on our detective hats. We know things like work and age are huge factors in people's lives. So what if we zoom in? What if we filter our data and only look at people who are in their prime working years, say 35 to 64, and are working full-time? Does the story change? Let's find out. And doing this is actually super easy in the software. We just go in and tell it to temporarily ignore everyone who doesn't fit our criteria. It's kind of like putting on a special pair of glasses that only lets you see the specific part of the data you're interested in. Okay, here we go. We run the exact same ANOVA, but just on our new focused group. And what happens? Well, most of the scores move around a little bit, but then, whoa, look at that last row. Males without children. Their average marginalization score just shot up from around 6.6 all the way to 8.16. Now that is a story. That 8.16 is the needle in the haystack we were searching for. By adding some context, by simply asking a more specific, more thoughtful question, we uncovered something way more powerful and, honestly, way more meaningful. It seems that for this specific group of men, the connection between not having kids and feeling marginalized is much, much stronger. So, let's just take a step back for a second and think about what this whole journey just taught us. Not just about ANOVA, but about what it means to analyze data. So what are the big lessons here? First, remember that ANOVA is like a green light. It tells you, go, there's something interesting here, but it doesn't give you a map. Second, you are the detective. The computer gives you clues, but it's your job to piece them together to find the story. And finally, context is everything. The most interesting stories are almost never sitting right on the surface. They're usually hidden just a little deeper, waiting for you to ask the right question. You know, in the end, ANOVA did give us an answer. It told us, yes, there's a relationship, but its real power wasn't in that simple yes. Its power wasn't pushing us, forcing us to ask a better, smarter question. And that's really the heart of data analysis. The tools don't just give you answers. They help you ask better questions. So the only thing left to think about is, what questions are you going to ask?